There are those that like to believe that we are alone in this universe, but there are those that know we are not. Over the course of history, there has been rare but consistent reports of unexplainable lights in our night sky. There are even people that have claimed to have been physically abducted and experimented on by extraterrestrial beings. It might be easy to brush these accounts off, plastering someone with the label of mentally ill simply because their claims are so unbelievable to the majority of people. But imagine actually having an alien encounter of your own. Would you share your experience with the world? Or would you keep it to yourself, knowing that everyone would think you're insane? But is it really that crazy of a concept? According to the calculations of University of Nottingham astrophysics professor Christopher Consolis, there could be more than 30 separate intelligent civilizations existing in our galaxy alone. This means that there are potentially multiple alien civilizations more advanced than ourselves living in the very same galaxy. In my opinion, it is entirely plausible that we have been visited at some point in history by an alien species on a mission to survey, observe, and experiment on us. They could even be here right now, living among us. 8 years ago, a user by the name of Yoga Butt posted to Ask Reddit asking for the stories of those who have claimed to have had some sort of unexplainable alien encounter. In this video, I'll be reading a few of these stories. This story is by an unknown Reddit user. Throwaway account because I'm afraid. I was first abducted in 1987. I was 12 years old. I say abducted because it's not like that. Actually, you go willingly. It's scary, but it's exciting too. And they are somehow able to make you feel you are okay about things. It's not until later that you feel bad or like you've been violated. And they don't do a lot of probing, like or anything like that. That's Hollywood nonsense. They look inside of people sometimes, but they have machines to do that. Not really machines, but it's like a room where they get things done, and the walls are... It's hard to explain. So just imagine that all the walls are like kind of X-ray machines. That's the easiest way to describe it. Sometimes there would be others there, and they would be looking into them, or they'd put them under and cut them open, but not usually. They took tissue samples from all of us, I think, and they never put you under or give you any anesthetic or anything. They just poke you. With those things, they take samples of the ocean floor. Like that, but really small. They pull out chunks of you. It's usually done on the butt or on the lower back. Mostly they talked with me. Just questions, and they'd show me things, like television shows and things, and they'd ask me questions about them. I think the walls measure our reactions to things too, same as they take x-rays. I don't know that, but it's the feeling that I got. They never let you ask questions about what they are doing. Even once I got friendly with a few of them. They just do not like it when you ask them questions. They hate it. You can't understand their language. It just sounds like... I'm positive that we'll never be able to communicate with them in their language. I should mention that these are the greys that you hear about, except that they aren't grey. They're sort of beige, and it's clothes anyway. They aren't naked. I don't know if there are others. People say there are, but I only ever met these. Anyway, you cannot understand them, but they can understand you, and they can put thoughts into your head, but they can't hear your thoughts. You have to speak to them. They cannot hear very well, or else they are just not good at understanding English, so you have to speak loudly and slowly. I don't know if they can understand other languages, but I'm pretty sure they would. They are all interested in all of us, in everything that goes in. They like a lot of things about our culture too. They like some of our music. Bluegrass is their favorite, as I've seen. They like it a lot. They love that African instrument that looks like a gourd with 13 strings. Love it, but they cannot stand horns or horn music, so they hate classical music and jazz. I think trumpets sort of sound like their language. It's the feeling that I get, but I've never been able to ask them. They've taken me up just about every 2 years, I'd say, since 1987. Just about. Sometimes it's more often. And I didn't go up there at all between 1995 and 2000. They usually keep me for what feels like a day, but it turns out to be about 4 hours, usually. The longest I stayed with them was 3 weeks. During that time, they made me make phone calls and keep up appearances. They aren't really bad, well, I was gonna say people, but they're not really bad people, or whatever. The following story is by user named HalfEmpty69. Okay, here it goes. The first time I'd ever seen anything, I was 7 in Houston, Texas. I used to like to climb on top of my mum's Suburban in the driveway and stare at the stars. One night, I saw an intensely bright floating light over the tree line, probably about half a mile away. I hollered, but nobody came to see it. I did not see anything else until March of 2008. This experience happened between the 10th and the 15th, but I can't give a specific date because I was up for 4 days trying to come up with some explanation to satisfy what I had seen. This was in Alabama. My mother lived in a garden home community, all houses the same size, all one story, and you had great visibility distance-wise. I walked out of my buddy's place at exactly 4 a.m. to a bright starry night. When I walked out, something caught my eye to the left of me. I looked over and saw a bright blue, yellow, green, white, red, orange, strobing flashing light floating silently to the left. I stood in awe of it, and I did not want to go grab anyone because I didn't want to miss anything. I watched as it passed in front of the moon behind my friend's place, and I saw the outline of the craft. It was a teardrop, sunflower seed type shape, and the craft seemed to have the lights being transmitted from the top half of it. It was almost as if it was transmitting some type of light pattern upward. It also had a dark, thin, smooth line of exhaust that disappeared 50 to 75 feet behind it. This all occurred no less than 400 yards away from me. After it passed the moon, I ran inside and grabbed someone. He saw it, but it was too far away to make out exactly what it was. I went home, which was only a few blocks away, and looked out from the driveway the same direction the first craft had come from. I saw 2 dim white lights slowly coming over the horizon at a slow pace heading towards me. I then ran inside and grabbed my mother out of bed. We stood there for about 20 minutes while 5 separate crafts flew over us. First came 2, then 2, and then 1. About 6 to 7 minutes apart from each other, maybe 20 miles an hour, maybe 200 feet up, completely silent. The way they looked from underneath was each one had 2 huge bright white lights, which were maybe 30 to 40 feet across each, but they were so bright it was hard to get a good estimate. They also had a pulsating red one between the white lights that dimmed and relit. I would estimate from the size of the white lights that each craft was maybe about 150 to 200 feet wide. The last craft that flew over us flew over lower and slower than the first 4 had. Then it made a noise. It let out a sound that to this day still haunts me. What I could best compare it to would be this sound, followed immediately after by this sound. Take those 2 sounds, except make it digital and multiply it by 50. This was loud. The aircraft did this twice. These crafts flew directly over us, and I believe that the sound was an acknowledgement. Whatever was piloting it knew that we were watching it, kind of like a hello. I immediately started crying. I had no idea what I was looking at or what I had just heard. The second big experience I had occurred a couple of weeks later. I was standing in my driveway smoking a cigarette, listening to my iPod somewhere around 2 a.m. I decided to pause my iPod to turn on the back light. I waved my hand over it a couple of times, making somewhat of a strobe pattern. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see anything come up, but I got that feeling of being watched. I looked up, and directly above me was a trapezoid-shaped craft with rounded edges that had a dark red and black, pulsating, glowing outline. It was like flowing electricity. It was not even 75 feet up. I could have hit this thing with a rock. I stood there while it hovered directly above me, completely silent for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, while it made this kind of motion similar to the ball that Luke trained with in Star Wars. It hovered side to side, front to back, in a smooth motion, never getting more than 20 feet away from its original position. It was extremely fascinating, but I was frozen stiff. After those few seconds, I waved one hand at it in a friendly manner, and then it changed light pattern and hovered away behind my house. Upon deeper inspection, the fact that it knew that I saw it, but made no effort to evade my detection, makes me think it wanted me to follow it, although I was too freaked out to think about it at the time. I have seen that same craft on 3 other different occasions, once again in Tuscaloosa, once in Hoover, and once in Bessemer. The time I saw it in Hoover was at an apartment complex at the top of a huge hill with a great overlook. It was nighttime and I was with friends. Over the overlook, I saw a grey craft facing my direction that looked similar to a Hoth fighter. Forgive the Star Wars references. And as soon as I saw it, it took off to the right silently, extremely quick. The times in Bessemer and Tuscaloosa, the trapezoid shape appeared in the sky, solid white, stretched to twice its length. Then, the bottom shot up the front, like it hit light speed or something. I do frequently see what I like to call streaks. They look like shooting stars, only very low, move slower, and they have tails that stream behind them. One strange story is one night when I had a dream in Tuscaloosa. In the dream, I couldn't see or hear anything, but I could feel things. I was laying on something cold, and I felt what seemed like rubber between my legs, around my junk. It was very strange to me, since a lot of people who report abductions report sperm and eggs being taken for breeding programs. The next morning, I went to let the dog out in the backyard, which is very small. To the left of the patio, there was a solid white ring in the grass that was maybe 8 to 10 feet wide. I showed my mother, and she told me that she heard a noise that night before that woke her up, but she just dismissed it. Another extremely confusing experience I had occurred in my driveway in Tuscaloosa. To give you an idea of where this occurred, look up Shelton State Community College. The house was less than a quarter mile from the campus in the Englewood neighborhood. It was nighttime, and I heard this static that I could compare to a jet. I looked over, and directly above the community college was a light blue slit in the sky. I would say it was maybe 200 yards long, completely vertical, and had what looked like white electric currents coming off both sides of it. I looked at it, and maybe about 25 white things shot out of the slit at a quick pace, leaving the trail behind it that I previously talked about. After they passed, the bottom of the slit went upward until the slit closed, and it made a strange sound, and then it was gone. I've also had a bunch of experiences with orbs, some solid lit that float across the sky or move in strange patterns, and some that brighten up to a great intensity and then fade as they pass. After the first big experience, I started doing some research because I was so confused. I understand that I've had an abnormally large amount of experiences, and I honestly can't tell you why. I wish I could. I found a type of UFO witness called a contactee. These people are similar to abductees, except they are kept up with. I have no idea why I have so many experiences, and I have only listed a fraction of them. My best guess would be that since I acknowledged the presence of whatever it was that I was seeing, it decided to keep up with me. It's kind of a gift and a curse. There are so few people that I can talk about it with and be taken seriously. I want to seek hypnotherapy to see if there might be anything else I could uncover. I'm grateful, but I still don't know much about my experiences. If y'all can get anything out of what I shared, then great. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. The following story is by an unknown Reddit user. I can't say for sure what happened to me that night, but here is what I know. I was driving home for the weekend from school at Indiana University. It takes me about 2 hours to get home, and I left Bloomington around 10 p.m. At exactly 10:53, I am on a rural stretch of the 2-lane highway I take home, and I notice what appeared to be flashing lights behind me. I thought, great, I'm getting pulled over, so I turned onto the next country road about a quarter mile from where I noticed the lights. As the car came to a stop, and I started to open my glove box to get out my registration and proof of insurance, the lights suddenly disappeared, and no car drove past. Now here is where the story takes a turn for the weird, and I am sure you guys will just think I'm making it all up because it really does seem like something straight out of a typical UFO movie or story. The electronics in my car started to go haywire. The radio was randomly changing stations while the volume kept going up and down while the dome light in the headlights started to flicker and turn off and back on. This was at 10:56 p.m. I start thinking to myself that my battery must be failing, or else I have a short somewhere in the electric system of my car. So I lean down to pop the hood so I can take a look at the battery, and this is the last thing that I remember doing. The next thing I know, I open my eyes and see nothing but the night sky full of bright stars. It was a cold night and it seemed like I had never seen stars that bright in my life. I sat up and looked around and I saw absolutely nothing. Nothing at all. I was in the middle of a field surrounded by corn stalks left over from the recent harvest. As I started to come to my senses, I started to freak out. Where am I? Why the fuck am I asleep in the middle of a field? Where the fuck is my car? I got up and started walking toward the distant headlights I could see from a road about a half mile away. When I got to the nearest intersection, I looked at the signs which read 350N and 50W. I was half a mile away from my car, which was right off the main road. I started walking towards the headlights I could see on the main road. I can't say how long it took me to walk the half mile, but it couldn't have been more than 10 or 15 minutes. When I arrived at my car, all the lights were out. My battery had died, which struck me as odd because I couldn't have been gone that long. I looked at my phone, which was sitting on the passenger seat, and the time was 2:17 a.m. Over 3 hours had passed since I turned off the side of the road for the flashing lights behind me. I remember sitting in my car completely dumbfounded, wondering what the hell had just happened to me. After about half of an hour of just sitting there, I remembered that my battery was dead, so I got up the phone and called AAA to come out and give me a jump. It took about an hour for them to get out to me since I was a good distance away from the nearest town, during which time I just sat in silence, running through the possible scenarios in my head concerning what had just happened. To this day, I couldn't tell you what really happened to me that night. All I know is I can't think of any plausible explanation as to why I woke up over half a mile away from my car in the middle of a cornfield more than 3 hours after I'd stopped. I have only shared this story with one other person, my uncle. I am sure people would either look at me like I'm crazy or they would call bullshit on the whole story, and I can't blame them. If someone came up to me with a story like that so closely mirrors the stereotypical encounter story, I probably wouldn't believe them either. Well, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be uploading on this channel every Friday, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified. And if you could leave a like on the video, that would really help me out a lot with growing the channel. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.